Well, I want to thank you all for inviting me here tonight. Miss Ollie Garrett, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for allowing me this time to speak to you all. Uncle Jerry, Aunt Tina, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. So I have a limited amount of time, and I'm going to run through this very quickly. So I want you to listen very closely. I'd like to begin by saying, if you've had too much to drink, this will be sobering. But we will end on a good note, so hang in there. I'll first introduce a little bit of history that you all may be familiar with, followed by some relevant data which you may not be familiar with. Finally, I'll offer you a new perspective for consideration and a new vision for working together in Seattle to strengthen the region's economic competitiveness over the next several decades, and that will require proactive planning and investment today. When you leave, you will do so facing a monumental opportunity to positively impact the economic future of this region and perhaps lead America in development of an inclusive economic framework. America has transitioned through three primary economies. In the 19th century, we had an agrarian economy. Agriculture was a significant means of generating revenue. In the 20th century, the industrial age ushered in a manufacturing economy. Factories dotted the landscape, workers flocked to the cities, and the age of urban economics was born. In the 21st century, America transitioned again, this time to a creative, knowledge-based, tech-driven, fast-paced global innovation economy. In each of these economies, Black Americans had three significant barriers to entry: lack of access, lack of infrastructure, and lack of ownership. In the 19th century agrarian economy, we were the property of others. We weren't considered Americans. Our sweat equity translated into wealth for those who owned us. With few exceptions, we had no access, no infrastructure, and no ownership. In the latter part of that century, the nation changed and the freedom arrived, but it arrived empty-handed, and we struggled to survive. In the 20th century manufacturing economy, we spent more than 80% of the entire industry, the entire century, seeking access to the title of American and struggling for access to civil rights and fair treatment as Americans. We had to build our own educational and business infrastructures without the benefit of generational wealth, and ownership was elusive to the vast majority of Black Americans. In search of opportunities for work, our communities dispersed across the nation and our communal infrastructure fragmented. Now let's face a difficult reality, folks. Black America was constructed out of necessity, because access into white America was restricted and prohibited to the vast majority of Black America. So Black America remains today the shared experiences of 13% of the population that is mostly hidden from the majority. America was in the past, and it is today, a divided nation, as anyone who follows politics can equally or readily attest. There's always someone who wants to take back this country from someone else who is apparently unaware that they've taken it. Today, the communication between politically divided Americans is so volatile that neither side accurately portrays the ideals of the other. Neither side seems genuinely interested in understanding the rationale that governs the perspective of the other. This seems true across racial and generational divides, as well as the political landscape. But America has evolved. Over the past 4 decades, since Dr. King was decrying the civil and economic injustices perpetuated by government and private sector, we have still evolved. Evidence of such evolution exists in the person of President Barack Obama. But opportunities in education, the private sector workforce, and the capacity to compete in the proverbial free market has evolved at a much slower pace. But we own some of that responsibility too, for the regression of our progress. Since the 60s, the disintegration of our core communal infrastructure in Black America, beginning with the family, accelerated the problems that came with external challenges, such as abject poverty, living in a hostile nation that incorporated its hostility throughout educational, legislative, and judicial institutions in every direction. With every effort, Black Americans were surrounded by manufactured institutional challenges that severely retarded progress throughout the 20th century and introduced conflicts both within the communities and between Black and white America. In the 21st century, in this innovation economy, there is hope. The nation and the world is changing and is currently in a state of rapid evolution and growth. Demographics are shifting and impacting political and economic powers. Technology is opening doors of access to opportunities. Yet, Black Americans continue to lack sufficient infrastructure, access, and ownership. Those same 3 problems. Because it doesn't magically happen as the old institutions of hostility slowly transition. And it doesn't magically happen the moment the nation elects a Black president. There must be deliberate strategy, planning, and investment in the local and regional levels, across racial divides that cuts through the fear-mongering and divisiveness of politics. There must be a sustained commitment and patient capital that seeks a long-term return on investment. America is changing. But fear of that change is ratcheting political rhetoric. We've come a long way over the past 40 years, and the pace of America's evolution is quickening. In 2050, this country's demographics will significantly shift. And if we don't prepare and equip all Americans to contribute in meaningful ways to the economy today, tomorrow's generation will suffer the consequences of our reluctance. Today, we have new hope. We have new opportunity. But in the innovation economy, a new challenge has also been introduced: awareness. As long as politics and social economic divides keep us apart and prevent us from knowing one another, we will continue to have profoundly different conversations, profoundly different perspectives, and profoundly different paradigms. For example, on September 20th through the 21st, the Private Equity Analysts Conference will convene in New York City to discuss a slate of economic issues that can be found nowhere on the agenda of the Congressional Black Caucus Annual Legislative Conference, which convenes in Washington, D.C. at the same time. Both conferences will attract the elite and powerful. Yet attendees at neither conference will be fully aware of the issues being discussed at the other. The lack of awareness of the processes of job growth and wealth creation in a new economy impacts Black Americans the most. Our struggles to overcome the past landscape that crippled our parents and grandparents continue. Without awareness that the economic game has been changed, our businesses and political leadership continue to communicate a message to the masses that is outdated and obsolete. Parents parrot that message to our youth, and our youth, most of whom will seek job opportunities with little more than a high school education, will find frustration instead. A high school education isn't enough to gain entry into middle-class America today. The marketing of higher education solely for the purpose of getting a good job ignores the reality of entrepreneurship, which is the principal wealth builder in the 21st century innovation economy. Most of us aren't even aware of the evidence of the new economy. And that's largely because it's not visible, and few of us ever talk about these economic issues. We talk about the lack of jobs in our communities, but we don't talk about the innovation economy and how jobs are created. Many of our journalists and elected officials don't raise these important issues. Our teachers, preachers, and community activists are unaware of the language, the infrastructure, the strategies, and the opportunities inherent in the innovation economy. The lack of awareness is pervasive. And therefore, it is imperative that investment be made in creating widespread awareness. Unlike the agrarian economy, in which agriculture afforded a visible opportunity to see the production of wealth, and the manufacturing economy that produced highly visible factories and related infrastructures and businesses, there are fewer obvious signs of wealth being generated in the 21st century. Today, multi-million-dollar businesses are built by teams of young people coding in their dorm rooms. Inventors tinker in their garages and emerge with products that make it to market in months. In 2011, just last year, angel investors and venture capitalists combined to invest more than $52 billion in roughly 70,000 companies. Black Americans are statistically nil on both sides of that equation, as investors and recipients of capital that scale companies and fuel growth. We are missing. The risk capital industry itself is a relatively new construct, born out of Rockefeller's investment in Intel in 1969, just a year after Dr. King's assassination. Since that time, the industry of private equity and venture capital has exploded, with more than 600 venture capital firms operating today and more than 318,000 active angel investors and hundreds of billions of dollars invested in new and growth stage companies that help drive the global economic competitiveness of America. Black Americans, with few exceptions, are largely missing from that landscape. The Kauffman Foundation, the nation's largest institution devoted to the study of entrepreneurship and education and innovation, tells us that since 1980, all net new jobs in America are due to startups, young companies 5 years old and younger. That's the Kauffman Foundation, all net new jobs. Each year, risk capital flows into developing these young companies. Entirely new infrastructures have been established to cultivate and nurture innovation and entrepreneurship across the nation, including right here in Seattle. From the pipeline of STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, that produces a competent, high-wage workforce, to the productivity of high-growth entrepreneurship fueled by creative financing and risk capital, America has reaped the rewards of wealth and established itself as an economic world leader. At the same time, America has failed to effectively address the consistent poor performance of its high-poverty public schools, where the percentage of student population is comprised of 89% minorities. Most of those students are not prepared with a core curriculum steeped in STEM. They have little hope of finding high-wage opportunities in today's advanced manufacturing and tech-driven sectors. And their innovative talents may never be realized because they lack the education required to bolster their creativity and capacity to contribute as innovators in the innovation economy. That must change. The cohorts of classes that emerge from this conveyor belt of contempt for education are destined to the predominant service sector workers, low-wage labor force, and possibly our permanent underclass. That's sobering. America sometimes peers down its nose upon those disconnected youth, and those adults who were disconnected youth of the past. And they wonder, why don't those people pull themselves up by their bootstraps? The Bureau of Labor Statistics answers that question. It tells us that from 2002 to 2007, entrepreneurship in Black America grew by an astounding 60%. By comparison, the same growth in white America was 18%. The 1.9 million Black-owned businesses that were a result of such phenomenal growth produced revenues of $137.5 billion, which amounted to less than 1% of GDP. 1.8 million of those 1.9 million businesses were sole proprietors with 0 employees. You can't contribute to the American economic competitiveness globally with that type of track record. Sadly, this is the most revenue our businesses have managed to produce. Then the economy collapsed. Black business owners lack access to capital. They lack an educational infrastructure that fosters and nurtures entrepreneurship. They lack generational knowledge, generational wealth, mentoring, networking, and support. Yet, in the shadow of such extreme hardship, Black America has continued to struggle to pull itself up. It is struggling here in Seattle as well. The innovation economy represents a democratized landscape of opportunity, but without awareness, without infrastructure, without networks, without knowledge, we continue to lack access and ownership. The result is predictable. We all must work together to change this dynamic. And we can rise above the past if we're willing to work together. And with the pace of innovation being what it is, and we're 12 years into the 21st century with tens of thousands of new businesses and new industries that didn't exist a decade ago, time is of the essence. If we intend to participate, compete, and contribute to America's new innovation economy, then we must strategize, plan, and act today. Tomorrow's future is at stake today. For Black Americans, who were a targeted people through 2 economic eras, the innovation economy is an opportunity to work with all Americans to invest in building an infrastructure that creates access channels to entrepreneurship and ownership, which leads to a greater contribution to the overall economic competitiveness of the nation, as well as greater wealth within our communities. Neither white nor Black America can build such an infrastructure alone. We must connect and collaborate with existing infrastructures, existing ownership, and existing leadership. We must recognize the nation has changed, and we must change with it. In like manner to the example set by you all here at Tabor 100, we must organize across the nation and reach across the racial divides and work together to develop an inclusive economic framework that invests in the potential of all our nation's talent. Now, this is an enormous challenge, and it's difficult to hear, but it does us no good to ignore the truth. Black Americans, of all Americans, are arguably the most fragmented and disconnected from the opportunities of the 21st century innovation economy. That is true in Cleveland and the entire Northeast Ohio region, where 20% of the population contributes less than 2% to the regional GDP. That economic equation is unsustainable. It is true in New York, where Mayor Bloomberg boasted just this week that New York City has had a 200% economic recovery compared to the nation's sluggish 40%. That means for every job New York City lost, it gained 2 more, says Mayor Bloomberg. What he failed to mention is that New York City has an appalling rate of 50% unemployment for Black Americans, and that includes those with college degrees. Here in Seattle, I've done a little research on you guys. Black Americans are disconnected as well. A quick trip down memory lane reveals not much changes from year to year and decade to decade. Your regional industry sectors lack the strength of diversity. And minority entrepreneurs here struggle mightily to gain access to opportunity to the value chains and contracting pipelines. When policymakers convene and economic strategists conduct their research, they should take a look around the table and see who is missing. That's the data that will be missing. And those are the contractors who will miss out. Still, despite the dismal reality, there is hope. With awareness comes concern. Concern is followed by conversation. Conversation leads to sharing of ideas and information, establishment of relationships, and opening doors of access to new opportunities. You're here tonight, establishing those conversations and relationships. That's heartening. And in the aftermath of America's Great Recession, which was a Great Depression for Black America, we desperately need new opportunities. Access to leadership networks can result in an inclusive framework that empowers disconnected people who bring new energy, creativity, and talent to bolster existing infrastructures. Strong economic infrastructures, from the pipeline of education to the productivity of entrepreneurship, will create new wealth and boost the economic competitiveness of this region and the nation. Now, I believe in America. More importantly, I believe in the potential of America to be better than it was in the past. I believe in the future of America. All of this nation, which is a multicultural melting pot of enormous talent. I co-founded the America 21 Project in January of 2011, along with a Cleveland attorney and former NFL running back, Jonathan Holyfield, who is one of the most brilliant tech-based economic development strategists I know. Jonathan is currently the nation's very first Vice President of Inclusive Competitiveness at Nortech, a tech-based economic development powerhouse that covers 21 counties in Northeast Ohio. Another brilliant co-founder of the America 21 Project is Dr. Chad Womack, a PhD scientist and biotech entrepreneur in Philadelphia, who is the most knowledgeable person I know on the issues of STEM education, tech transfer, and P20 alignment with industry. America 21 envisions a more cohesive and inclusive 21st century America. We have three primary goals. One, we seek to change the economic narrative across Black, Hispanic, and urban America. Two, we promote inclusive competitiveness across established economic ecosystems. And three, we connect the economically disconnected to regional innovation and opportunity. America 21 works with partners in targeted regions around the nation who help institute our pipeline to productivity framework. And this seamless channel of connectivity consists of only three pillars: STEM education and workforce development, entrepreneurship, especially high-growth entrepreneurship, and then access to capital and risk capital formation. In the past 18 months of our existence, yes, we're new, we're brand new, we've established a national reputation as the leading voice of inclusive competitiveness in America. We are recognized from the White House to Silicon Valley because of that message. We're working with partners around the nation, and we're very excited about the support we've received from the Portland Development Commission and our newly established partner, Ideal Portland, which was created to do the work of producing the Portland Urban Innovation Roundtable. It's a new construct that I introduced last year at a gathering of leaders at the University of Portland. The Portland Urban Innovation Roundtable will be the nation's first neutral platform in which stakeholders from across the region and economic divides will come together to form economic strategies, plans, and investment in development of an inclusive STEM education pipeline that nurtures high-growth urban entrepreneurs and access to funds that support urban innovation and entrepreneurship. This inclusive framework is deliberate, it's strategic, and it's committed to ensuring the health and wealth of all residents and communities in the Portland region. In closing, I want to extend an invitation to all of you to come to the Small Business Innovation Research Conference in Portland, November 13th through the 15th. The theme this year, for the very first time, is increasing minority applicants in the SBIR competitive process to more than $2 billion in grants available to small businesses. I look forward to witnessing progress in Seattle's established innovation ecosystem and the mapping of local assets in partnership with Tabor 100 members and local universities. You don't know what exists here if you haven't mapped it. Such new and important data is vital to informing your leadership as it moves toward creating an inclusive regional economic framework in this region. America 21 stands ready to engage and partner with you in these efforts to strengthen the economic competitiveness of the Pacific Northwest. And I want to again thank Holly Garrett and Tabor 100 and all of you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. Thank you.